I'm anxious and can't stop overthinking. Dialogues to understand anxiety, beat negative spirals, improve self-talk, and change your beliefs. Written by Nick Trenton, narrated by Russell Newton.
I've been thinking about what you said last week. I think you got me all wrong. Leah strode into the therapy room and was talking before she'd even sat down. She didn't seem to notice the slightly amused look on Dr. Amanda's face. "Whoa, slow down. Hello," Dr. Amanda said. Sorry, I'm being rude. Hello, I've been thinking about what you said." "Oh? And what did I say?" Dr. Amanda pushed her glasses up her nose a little. Leah wondered at this. Had she always worn glasses? She could not remember them from last time. Had she really overlooked them for the full hour? Leah cleared her throat. She'd been rehearsing a little speech in her head all week, but the moment she opened her mouth, the words came out a lot angrier than she had planned. "You said to me that basically I'm making myself feel like a loser because thoughts influence the way you feel, right? So the reason I feel like a loser is just because I think I'm a loser. But I've got to say, Dr. Amanda, I think you've really misunderstood me if you think that was what I was saying. And actually, I got to thinking about it, and I think you're wrong to blame me like that. Blame me for being an introvert, for being upset. I can't help the way I am, you know." Dr. Amanda said nothing. "So?" said Leah. "So what?" said Dr. Amanda. "So I think you've got me wrong, that's all." Again, Dr. Amanda said nothing. Leah began to regret her outburst, and yet she felt good that she had spoken up for herself. It was something she never, ever did. "Okay, so I've got you wrong," said Dr. Amanda. "Then put me right." Here, she leaned forward and picked up a pad of paper and pen, then poised herself ready to write. "Let's put it down on paper so we can both be clear about what we are and are not saying. What do you think?" Leah gave her a sideways look. She had assumed Dr. Amanda would be annoyed with her, but she was surprisingly calm. "Okay," she said. "So, tell me," said Dr. Amanda, "what is it you think I think about you? Let's write it down." "Well, okay, you think that everything in my life is just fine, and I'm making myself unhappy by thinking that I'm a loser, but it's not true." Leah waited for the doctor to argue with her, but there was no sound but the scratching of the pen on paper. "Anything else?" "I'm not wrong to say that, you know, to say that people don't like me." "Well, Leah, the last thing in the world I want is for you to feel like I'm attacking or blaming you. That wasn't my intention, and it will never be my intention. But I can see that this has struck a nerve for you. Quickly remind me what degree you're doing. It's a science degree, isn't it?" "It's chemistry, yes." "So, would I be right to assume that you know a little something about hypotheses, about the scientific method?" "Of course." "Good, that's good. Let's try this again and see if we can get a little further with it. Will you try an experiment with me? Obviously not exactly like a scientific experiment, but one not far off." "Sure, okay, I guess. But I think I know where you're going with this." "You do?" "Yeah. I read up on CBT last night." "So what do you think I'm about to suggest?" "I don't know. You're going to argue with me and tell me that I actually don't have any evidence for what I think and believe." "What would you have said then if I told you that you didn't have any evidence for the things you thought?" "Well," here Leah got flustered, "that's the thing. I do have evidence. Lots and lots of evidence. All my life, people haven't liked me. I'm not stupid. I can tell. So, the people who were at the presentation you told me about, the one where you couldn't find your words and got really embarrassed, can we go back to them? Did they not like you? They hated me. I see. And you have evidence for this. I certainly wouldn't stop you from believing something you have evidence for. Yes, I do have evidence. They were all staring at me with these, horrible looks on their faces. I see. And that's when they told you they didn't like you? No, they didn't say anything. They didn't have to. So what's the evidence? I just told you. The way they looked at me. The way that... Leah cut herself short. Look, I'm not an idiot. I can tell. Leah, I want you to understand me here. I'm sure that in that moment, you felt really bad. I have no doubt about that. I just wonder how you could possibly know what the other students were thinking. You're a smart woman, but I'm pretty sure you can't read minds. Leah said nothing. She folded her arms and stared out the window. But for the sake of arguing, let's say you're right, continued Dr. Amanda. Let's say they don't like you. Maybe they were thinking that. Leah shot her a look. What? That doesn't seem like something a good therapist should say. She laughed. Why not? I don't know. I can't come in here and say all these bad things and then you agree with me. Well, I'm not saying it's true, but I am curious about this thought. You mentioned it today, and you mentioned it last time, too. People don't like me. People hate me. I don't know you, and I can't say with any certainty what those students were thinking in the tutorial that day, but I think these thoughts tell us more about you than they tell us about them. How do you mean? Well, there's an exercise I do with my clients sometimes where we try to drill down to their core beliefs. Would you like to try it with me? Okay, but... Well, I'm sorry for being a bit touchy about all this. It's okay, Leah. I know this stuff can be kind of outside the comfort zone. We're here and figuring this stuff out together, right? Right. So, let's look at my little paper here. I wrote down some things you told me. Can I read them back to you? Okay. It says, I'm an introvert. People hate introverts. Now, bear with me. Do you think it's really true that people hate introverts? Hate is a pretty strong word. But they do, though. Well, I'm an introvert. Do you hate me? Of course not. Okay, so maybe we can change this statement a little. Dr. Amanda's pen got scratching on the page again, and she held up a new sentence, written in big, neat block capital letters. It said, People sometimes hate introverts. What do you think? She asked Leah. Do you think this new version is reasonable? Leah nodded. Actually, I'm still not happy about this word hate, though. Can we think of a slightly less harsh word? Let's put dislike then, Leah said. But some people do hate introverts. Just maybe not all of them do. Dr. Amanda nodded and the pen scratched softly on the paper. They both looked down at the words. Some people sometimes dislike introverts. Dr. Amanda took a deep breath. Leah, do you remember the last session? You told me how it felt when you had the thought that people hated you. Do you remember? Yeah. I said it made me feel small. Exactly, small. You said it made you feel really bad. Let's see how this thought compares. Can you read it for me? What? Out loud? Leah cleared her throat and read the words on the paper. Then she read them again. How do you feel? Still small? Leah paused. She was surprised. She didn't feel much at all. It seemed like a reasonable, fairly boring sentence. But I don't get it. Do we stop there? Leah said. Don't you want me to keep rewriting it until it says, I don't know, something positive? Positive? Like, I don't know. Give me an affirmation or something. Introverts are amazing just as they are. Something like that. Do you believe that? Not really. Me neither. For the second time that session, Leah felt herself feeling very surprised. Some people sometimes dislike introverts. That was the big empowering result of the exercise. But, so you're saying that some people, some of the time, will actually dislike me? That seems extreme to you? Yet a moment ago you were telling me that they all did. Leah laughed. You got me there. Tell me, what does it feel like when you think this new thought? Some people sometimes dislike introverts. It doesn't make me feel small and bad, I agree. But it just feels wrong somehow. The pause seemed to last an eternity. Leah, can you complete this sentence for me? I think that people should... And she paused. People should... Leah thought for a moment. Well, people should be kind to me. People should like me for who I am? Okay, said Dr. Amanda. Let's slow down and have a look at this idea, this thought. People should like me for who I am. I'm going to ask you now to treat this thought as though it were a hypothesis. Yes, Leah said and nodded her head. That's what I read up about last night when I researched all this online, you know. They said CBT is about challenging your thoughts. Exactly. I mean, I always thought challenge sounded a little rude, so I'd like to think of it as more like a discussion. Or like just putting ideas in the interview seat and seeing whether they're really worth your belief. Leah laughed. What's so funny? Well, I thought this was going to go completely differently. I thought I was going to say everyone hates me, and then you would argue with me and try to convince me that I was wrong, because what? Well, I don't know. Because I'm amazing and lovable exactly as I am. I thought you were going to try to tell me that my self-esteem was low, that I needed to love myself, and all that. Said Dr. Amanda. I have the feeling you really would have hated that. Well, it just feels phony. Like, it doesn't make sense to me to just say how much you love yourself, and how you're just fine and perfect as you are, and everything's okay, and yet you don't really believe it. I guess I've misunderstood what CBT is. You're clearly very smart, Leah. I like the fact that you're asking questions about all this. You don't take anyone's word for it, do you? What I'm trying to do is show you that you shouldn't automatically take your own word for it either. Leah rubbed her head and tried to think. So, you say I should treat this idea as a hypothesis? This idea that everyone should like me? Yes, you got it. Right now, it looks to me like an opinion, but you talk as though it were a fact. So would you be willing to take a closer look and see whether it really is a fact? I mean, there's a chance I am actually right, though, isn't there? Dr. Amanda smiled. There's only one way to find out. Leah smiled, and for the first time, felt like she was getting into this therapy thing. Maybe, said Leah, we should write this down too? Good thinking, said Dr. Amanda, and began to scribble it down. People should like me. They both stared at the words on the page. Somehow, Seeing them written down there like that made the whole idea seem so much smaller. Leah noticed how much better it felt to write it down, and how, with both her and Dr. Amanda staring down at it like a team, it felt like just a word puzzle, just a little word game to figure out. "The thing I'm thinking about," said Dr. Amanda, "is that there have to be some people in your world that you don't like." "Sure," Leah laughed. "Loads." "Okay, good. Can you think of just one of them? You don't have to tell me who it is." Leah pondered to herself and then nodded her head. "Now, can you tell me exactly why you dislike this person?" "Well, I don't know. She's kind of annoying. I always found her a little bit of an attention seeker, you know. She's very loud." "Okay. And you don't like her much?" "No." "Well, what if I told you that you should like her?" "Well, I'd say I just don't." "Yeah. So what's wrong in this scenario? Is it you, or is it this other girl?" "Who is wrong? I don't know. Nobody's wrong. I just don't like her." "So she is who she is, and you don't like her?" "I guess so." "And that's not a problem?" "Well, it's not a problem. I guess not. I mean, she's always going to be who she is." "What if she demanded that you like her?" "I just wouldn't," Leah laughed. "I think you can see where I'm going with this," said Dr. Amanda. Leah was quiet for a while. "You're saying that I have the right to dislike other people, so they have a right to dislike me?" "Well, what do you think about that?" "I mean, it still doesn't feel good to have people dislike you." "No, I never said it felt good. I just said that people are allowed to dislike who they dislike. You're allowed to dislike who you dislike, after all." "But let's go a little further. You have this belief, and it's a belief, that people should like you. But let me ask you now, what's so bad about people not liking you?" Leah scoffed. "What's so bad about it? Isn't it obvious? It feels horrible." "Okay, but why exactly? What makes it horrible? If people don't like you, then it would mean..." It would mean," said Leah, "it would mean that they thought I was bad somehow." "And what's so terrible about that?" Leah stammered. "It's bad because then I'd be excluded. I'd be like an outcast." "Being an outcast, why is that a problem? Why does it imply if people decide to exclude you?" "I don't know." "Think about it. Why does the idea of them excluding you hurt? What does it imply?" "Well, it implies that I'm bad, that I'm less than they are." A tear rolled down Leah's cheek. There was silence. "If people don't like me, it means I'm bad," said Dr. Amanda quietly. Then she repeated the sentence more slowly. The words hung between them, dark and heavy. Leah felt exhausted and upset. "I know these things are difficult to talk about," said Dr. Amanda, "but some people like to call these deeper ideas core beliefs. They're the more fundamental ideas we have underneath our everyday thoughts. We all have our beliefs and ideas about other people, the world, ourselves. The trouble is that sometimes these core beliefs are not very reasonable, and sometimes they work against us." Leah said nothing for the longest time. Then, the clock on the wall caught her eye. The session had already run over by 2 minutes. Almost reading her mind, Dr. Amanda nodded and stood. They both took their time walking to the door, Leah still processing the discussion. "Before you go, though," Dr. Amanda said, "did you manage to complete the homework I gave you last week?" Then, seeing Leah's expression, she smiled and continued, "Would you like to complete it and bring it with you next week?" Leah nodded. She had not planned to come back after this session. She had not planned on ever completing the homework. But now, she had to admit that there might be something here, something worth returning to. "Yes, I'll bring it. Thank you so much, Dr. Amanda." "Oh, thank you." Reflect. What did you think of the session? Was there anything in particular that stood out to you? What do you think about Leah's expectation that she would be given an affirmation and encouraged to believe that she's perfect just the way she is? What do you think the difference is between challenging a thought and questioning it? The technique that Dr. Amanda used in this session has many names, but is sometimes referred as the downward arrow technique. It's a method of using targeted questions to drill down to a person's core beliefs, those fundamental ideas and thoughts that inform and shape all other ideas and thoughts. Leah had a core belief that went something like, "If people don't like me, then it means I'm a bad person." In fact, there is an even deeper, more fundamental level to this belief, which is simply, I'm a bad person. If someone were to believe this on a fundamental level, then they may consequently believe that external validation is necessary for them to be considered a worthwhile human being. So that's why not having this external validation is such a big problem. Someone who had a core belief that they were fundamentally a good person might be able to tolerate someone else's dislike for them because they knew that external opinion didn't define who they ultimately were. Dr. Amanda could have merely said, "You're fine as you are," but Leah would have instantly rejected this as phony. We can see why everything in the world is interpreted through the lens of our core beliefs. If Dr. Amanda had simply told Leah that she was a good person, Leah would have filtered this through her pre-existing beliefs and concluded that Dr. Amanda was lying or just plain wrong. This is why CBT is not just about arguing with people on an intellectual level to try to convince them of the irrationality of their new beliefs. Instead, Dr. Amanda didn't tell Leah what her beliefs were or that they were wrong. She simply asked questions. You can uncover your own core beliefs in just the same way, by asking questions. Try the downward arrow technique yourself. First, try to become aware of thoughts racing around in your mind, and slow down enough to put a few of them into words. Write them down if you can. Then look at these thoughts and get curious about them. Ask if you have any evidence for them, or if there may be alternative explanations. To do the downward arrow technique, identify a thought that is distressing you, then ask one of the following questions of it. What would be so bad about that? And what does that imply? And so what? What does that mean? Keep asking in exactly the way Dr. Amanda did, and soon you will arrive at a core belief. The interesting thing is that people's negative core beliefs tend to be very similar. They're often variations on the theme of not being good enough or of the world being a dangerous or bad place. Try not to get too hung up on the wording of the belief. A core belief is not a verbal thing. It's a way of making sense of the world, and it encompasses our feelings, assumptions, and ways that we make meaning.
This has been I'm Anxious and Can't Stop Overthinking. Dialogues to understand anxiety, beat negative spirals, improve self-talk, and change your beliefs. Written by Nick Trenton, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2024 by Nick Trenton. Production copyright by Nick Trenton.